We break down every safety for the Chicago Bears next on the Unbearable Sports podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and welcome back. We have the start of the camp countdown to camp, whatever alliteration term that you want to use. Welcome in. We are going to be breaking down every position group for the next handful of weeks up until training camp. I'm recording this on Tuesday, so we are 90 days away. It's hopefully going to sneak up on us fast because I can't wait for some football. We're kind of in that dead time right now, and that's why I'm thinking let's break down all these different position groups and just kind of go through the Chicago Bears roster to know who's there before training camp. But if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. We went over 500, so thank you guys so much. Or you can also download the podcast. Download it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you watch podcast or listen to podcast. Make sure to download that, and thank you all so much. So let's get right into this then. We're going to be covering the safeties. But first, before we get into the safeties today, I want to just break down a little bit of news that we do have. So a couple OTA updates. I haven't broken this down yet, but you probably already heard this, that the Bears did not have one of the OTA practices because they were too physical. I, for one, love the idea that they were a little bit too physical. Rather have them too physical than not so physical. Just don't go too far, and when the NFL then has to come in and start docking you some draft picks. So it's good at least one time, but just be on the lookout for it. But the only other big piece was Braxton Jones starting with the ones and Teven Jenkins being on the twos. So Braxton Jones being that left tackle, and then Borum switched over to right tackle as the starting spot. And Eberflus just kind of said, hey, listen, don't look too much into this. This is just OTAs. And I think that this just says more about who Braxton Jones is. To me, what I'm taking out of it is they must like the guy. Not saying he's going to be starting for us anytime soon, but what I am saying is that maybe if like Borum, maybe this is like the contingency plan. If Teven Jenkins were to go down, now you can switch Borum over, and then Braxton Jones would be your left tackle. That's probably what they were more so trying to test out, rather than anything different. So, like if Jenkins went down, it sounds like they probably wouldn't want Braxton Jones to be right tackle. They'd probably want Borum to be right tackle. So that's the way that I took it, at least. But you could take it any way that you want. This is just OTAs. But the only other little bit of news, Bears signed Mike Pennell, and also cut Jeremiah Attaochu. For those on YouTube, my graphic doesn't even have that out there. Jeremiah Attaochu, cutting him, we saved $2.45 million in cap space, which is pretty nice. Unfortunate because he was excited about this scheme, but maybe the injury just was too much for him and he just didn't look as explosive as we were kind of hoping for. So we'll see if we add anyone new, or maybe it shows that we just really like Dominique Robinson. Who knows? But now let's get into the safeties. So what we're going to be breaking down for all of these different countdown to camp countdowns, we're going to be breaking down and having a player profile for every single person that is on this team. And then after we kind of review who's on the depth chart, who's on the team, we're then going to go through some over-unders from stats that we had last year saying, do we think that they're going to be better or do we think they're going to be worse? At the very end, we'll just sum it all up and say, is this position group truly better or truly worst? So let's get into the safeties. So with the safeties, the first group, let's just first look at the depth chart. So with this depth chart, we have Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker pretty much penned in as the starters. Jaquan Brisker really just kind of stole the starting job as soon as he got drafted. And if you watch his tape, you can definitely see that. Our backups are DeAndre Houston Carson and Dane Cruikshank. And then the very, very big backups, we have Elijah Hicks, Jalen Jones, AJ Thomas, Michael Joseph, and who's not pictured on my graphic for those watching is John Alexander, the safety out of Charlotte. But let's get into the first player that I want to talk about, and let's actually go over to Jaquan Brisker. So Jaquan Brisker is our starting strong safety, or pretty much guaranteed that starting spot. He went to college in Penn State, for those that don't know, and he's about 6'1", 200 pounds. Now, he was picked in that kind of Khalil Mack spot, if you will, because pick 48, what we traded for Khalil Mack. Now, if you're someone who's going to be comparing Jaquan Brisker to Khalil Mack, don't for this year. There's a lot more benefits that we get, like the cap savings. Is Jaquan Brisker going to be good? I think so. Is he going to play like a Hall of Fame player this year? Probably not. He's still a rookie. I still really like his tape. I like what he put out there on film for everybody because he, to me, has a good blend of tackling ability and also ball skills. He reminds me a little bit of Adrian Amos to an extent because Adrian Amos, you could always rely on making that tackle. And we really haven't had anybody that's been reliable. We had Clinton Dix, who we all know can't really tackle. And Eddie Jackson, his tackling has kind of taken a hit. And then Tashawn Gibson was always kind of banged up and never really great. So I'm really hoping that his physical style of play can really be great for the Chicago Bears. Now, last year, he didn't have a great statistical season, but still a good season. He had 6 tackle for losses in, I think, 12 games, which is pretty good for a safety, and 63 tackles and 2 interceptions and 5 passes defended for the Penn State Nittany Lions. So a pretty decent season, but yet again, stats don't tell the story for just how good of a player he was and what he put on film. And it's really telling because he really did not get a lot of competition for this starting spot. Comes in, he's starting, and it seems like everyone's like, yeah, he got the job. Because you see, he's just a very, very good player. Like we said, aggressive, and also word is that he's starting to learn the peanut punch or started to show it off in a little bit of practice. We'll see if it actually translates over to his game because I saw he has not forced a fumble in his collegiate career. So maybe that gives him that extra little boost that he needs, but we'll see. Practice is different than definitely in the game. As long as he's not Eddie Jackson, being like Eddie Jackson and trying to just always strip and not tackle, then that's when we'll have a problem. But also, too, I just want to bring this up. It's a very good selection. I was such a big fan of this Jaquan Brisker signing. I know a lot of people might say, well, what about a wide receiver? What about an offensive lineman? I think that the Jaquan Brisker signing, the draft of him was phenomenal because it was a huge position of need, and we'll see this later on. But also, it's rumored that he was the second person on their board right below Kyler Gordon, who they selected at 39. So a lot of people, a lot of experts were saying, hey, Jaquan Brisker was probably going to be selected then if Kyler Gordon wasn't there. So to me, great value, and it really shores up this defensive backfield as a whole. But really, overall, I think the expectations of Jaquan Brisker, I see him as kind of like the first year Adrian Amos kind of started. The physical brand of football, a trustworthy safety that we have on the back end. I think he projects best to a cover 2 system, which is exactly what we run. So I'm all ecstatic to see this guy play in a Chicago Bears uniform. So I'm pumped. I'm pumped to see it, and I think he's going to be an easy upgrade for us at this position, even as a rookie. Do I expect him to make the Pro Bowl year 1? No. But do I expect him to be good? Yes. And sometimes that's all we can really ask for. But let's flip over to the other side. So Jaquan Brisker is that safety, but now let's switch over to Eddie Jackson. Now, Eddie Jackson is coming into another year where a lot of us are saying, I think he's a little overpaid. The play has not equaled the amount of money that he got with that big, giant contract. But to be fair, he hasn't played poorly. He's just played solid, which you're not going to pay a solid safety that type of money. That's the way that I see it, because when I watch him, he's a good player. He still has that dog in him, but he's just not playing like a star. He's not playing like an all-pro or even a Pro Bowl type of player. He's just playing okay, not worth the money. But is he going to be able to take that next step? And honestly, I feel like this is kind of like a Mitch Trubisky situation where we're like, this is the year. This is the year that Mitch is going to bring it all together, right? Or this is the year that Jay Cutler is going to put it all together. To me, it's very similar with Eddie Jackson. Eddie Jackson, I really do feel like this is going to be the year. We have a zone-heavy scheme with a brand new coaching staff. Think about this a lot like you at a job. If you have brand new management, your company gets acquired. If you're a senior level person that's getting paid all this money, you have to prove your worth all over again. People aren't just going to say, oh, that guy's making that much. He's totally worth it. You have to show what you can do rather than saying, like what Eddie Jackson would say, remember what I did 4 years ago? I was really good 4 years ago. And that's why I deserve this contract. He needs to put up or shut up this year. And that's why I hope they don't cut him. I hope they don't trade him, because I want to see what he's capable of. And it seems like this year he's coming in with a good mentality, comes in with film and says, this is what I'm doing bad, and this is how I want to be better. But also keep in mind too, he has no interceptions when he was playing next to Deshaun Gibson. It's something very interesting to think about. And that's why I think Brisker, being kind of in that Adrian Amos type of role, I think he's going to probably unlock Eddie Jackson. And you have the new scheme. You have the new people that is going to light a fire underneath them. But with the new personnel, the new Jaquan Brisker, I think that Eddie Jackson, not saying he's going to be a dominant force, but I think he's going to be someone you look at as a potential Pro Bowler, which would definitely be a step up than what we have seen in previous years. But also just his overall career stats. He averages about 70 tackles per season or so and averages about 2 interceptions per year. But yet again, he had 10 interceptions in his first 3 seasons and 0 interceptions in the past 2. He's forced 8 forced fumbles in his entire career, and hopefully it just keeps continuing. And hopefully too, he changes the way that he tackles and tries to go back to number 39 rather than number 4, where he just kind of tries to strip it all the time. Just try and make some big tackles. Just try. Hopefully that hits principle really rubs off on him and he just becomes a better player overall. But really, I like the starting group. To me, the safeties for the Chicago Bears, I see as a big strong suit. And I don't know if that's not saying much for the rest of the team, but I really think that Eddie Jackson's going to thrive in this system. I think that Jaquan Brisker is going to be very good in his first year, and I feel confident with this. That's why I like the Jaquan Brisker pick so much, because of the kind of put at ease that these guys are going to be the people. So starters, I like them. I think that it's a very good starting group that we have out here. But now let's get into these the backups, the second stringers. So we have to talk about DHC, DeAndre Houston Carson. So DHC out of William and Mary, 6 foot, 202. I always thought that he was a little bit bigger, but he is listed at only 6 foot. Now the big question with DHC to me is he an Eberflus guy? Is he a Ryan Poles guy? Whoever you want to look at it, is he part of this system? I said this last show. Who from the previous regime is still on this team? The answer is not a lot of people. You look around, you're like, oh, Latavius Simmons got signed. He's probably going to get cut. So to me, DHC, he needs to show that I'm a good player out here. I can play very well. Last year, he was thrusted into a starting role for, I think, about 4 games. He had 38 tackles on the season. He had a PFF grade about 78, which is pretty good, especially for the safeties, and he was always a little bit higher up. His tackle percentage was 94.1 according to PFF, so tackled at about a 94% clip, while a lot of other defensive backs are 10% or higher, or 10% miss rate or higher, which is phenomenal for a DHC. And also 1 interception, which we did not turn over the ball a lot, so he was one of the leaders in that poor category. So to me, I'm looking at DHC as, can he be that big nickel guy? And also, are we going to be playing big nickel? For those that don't know what big nickel is pretty much like your standard nickel package. So 4 down defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 3 corners and 2 safeties. That's a basic nickel. So the big nickel is basically you swap out one of those linebackers, one of those 2 linebackers, with a safety or a defensive back. Some people also cheat and just say it's a dime because you only have 1 linebacker out there. But other people also call it a big nickel. Now, my big question with this big nickel is, did they only do this because Danny Trevathan was so poor in coverage? Because if you saw, right when Danny Trevathan kind of the wheels fell off and he couldn't run anymore, then you started to see Deon Bush, you started to see DHC play more in that big nickel role. So my question is, first off, is Alan Williams going to play more big nickel and incorporate more of a safety? And is DHC going to be that guy? We know he's a special teams player. We know he's really good with that. And also, a lot of the players, they praised him last year. There was one of those questions in the practice where they have the camera set up, and they were talking about wits or something like that. And so many people said DHC is just a leader and a very, very smart player. That's probably why you see him back here. And I really hope that he can make his way into at least the defensive rotation, because I always like the concept of having an extra safety there just to kind of provide extra coverage. But we have Nicholas Morrow. How much do we like Nicholas Morrow in coverage? Because that might be where we don't see these big nickel or dime defenses anymore because we have so much confidence in Nicholas Morrow. Definitely stuff to be watching as training camp comes out. Even the preseason games. Do we see some of those formations out there where we have 3 safeties and only 1 linebacker? But I hope that he plays a little bit more defense. I always loved it when he was out there. Just a very, very smart player and just good. So I really hope that he does stay on this team and becomes that true backup safety. And where he's going to be fighting for a little bit of time is at the second level against Dane Cruikshank, who is the newcomer onto this team. Dane Cruikshank started 4 games, very, very similar to a DHC. 4 games last year for the Tennessee Titans. He went to college out in Arizona. He's about 6'1", 209, so decent size for a safety for sure. But the big question is he the new big nickel? Is he the person that they want rather than a DHC if they were to play that big nickel? So is he going to take some of those defensive snaps away? I'm not sure. I hope DHC is the person, but I could see this new regime saying, Cruikshank, we brought you in for a reason, and that's why you're going to get the snaps rather than DHC. Something definitely to monitor over training camp, but I'm hoping that it's more DHC. Now, Cruikshank, if you don't know too much about him, you're not alone. Not a lot of people know a lot about Dane Cruikshank, but the one thing that I will say is he was put on the map when he kind of locked down Travis Kelce, or quote-unquote locked down Travis Kelce. According to the stats, he only let up 35 yards, even though that Travis Kelce ended up going for 65. But that's really what kind of put him on a lot of people's radars. They saw him lined up, and here's this kind of bigger safety, if you will, 6'1", about 210, lining up against a tight end. That might be why the Bears wanted to get him and say he might have some upside as kind of a in-the-box lineup type of safety. But also, too, he only played 2 games in 2020 due to a groin injury. Seems to be okay from that perspective, but something to at least kind of note. So really, that's why I'm curious if Williams and Eberflus really want this person to be a starter, or not a starter, to at least have some more play time over a DHC. But let me know what you think down in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, because this to me is the only position battle, or big position battle, from this safety position that really kind of intrigues me, because I don't know what they're going to be doing, if they're going to be trying to have some of those 3 safety sets. But let's go back to the depth chart, and now we've gone through the backups, we've gone through the starters, and now it's time for the 3rd and 4th stringers. We won't go through these in as much depth. So Jalen Jones, AJ Thomas, I really don't expect them to be on the team. We'll see. We'll monitor in training camp. Are they actually making some waves out there in training camp? And even Michael Joseph. He's the guy that is the big speedster that's been really just on our practice squad. Is he going to stay? My assumption is probably not, because new regime, usually a new practice squad. So probably more so added because he was on the old practice squad, and you can get them pretty cheap. And you probably want to see also, what do you have on this team before you start making cuts and roster decisions. But let's go to a player that I know intrigues a lot of us, and that's our 3rd string free safety, Elijah Hicks, the rookie out of California, pick 250 for round 7, 5'11", 200 pounds. So definitely the smallest safety that we have out there. And the big question here, can we expect anything from Elijah Hicks? What should the expectations be of this Elijah Hicks? Now, I did not know who this person was. I love the draft. I've never heard of Elijah Hicks going into the draft. But seriously, he had some incredible numbers. Last year, he put up 3 interceptions, 72 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, and 5.5 tackle for losses. Really good numbers for him at California in his 5th season. So it was kind of that COVID senior, if that a lot of people kind of talk about, where he's played and started 5 years. So it's really more of that kind of, you're older than everybody else. So a lot of times people say that doesn't necessarily count, but still put up very good numbers. While at California, he played 3 years at cornerback until they switched over to safety. Biggest reason, at least the way that I was seeing it, he wasn't a great man coverage player. So as a cornerback, just wasn't great. So they said, hey, you're still very talented. Let's move you over to safety, that's where he saw a little bit more production and a little bit more success. Now, according to SI.com, they're saying that he's a high floor player. I remember reading this and they're like, yeah, he should be able to stick on any team, which is kind of surprising for a lot of 7th round players. The norm is really to kind of stash those 7th round players on your practice squad, and you can always protect them if you wanted to. So he could be destined for the practice squad unless they think he can carve out a role in special teams. I don't think he's taking DHC's job. I don't think he's taking Cruikshank's job. I think he's more so fighting to stay on this roster versus practice squad. He's a fiery, aggressive leader type of player. If you saw him get drafted, made you crack up. So I, for one, hope that he does well and hope he stays on the team. But really, we have to see how he is as a special teamer. Can he make the tackles as a smaller, undersized safety to stick on this roster? But also, there is one player in this 3rd string that I have purposely left for last because he's so off the radar. Like I said, he's not even on the graphic. He low-key signed a 3-year deal as an undrafted rookie free agent this year. And that's John Alexander, the safety out of Charlotte. He is 6'2". Some people have him listed as 6'3", 217. Absolutely huge, absolutely massive. He has everything that you want athletically as a safety. And he's a dark horse that he might make the roster. I'm curious if when they gave him that 3-year deal, if they're maybe saying, hey, Elijah Hicks, maybe you're a practice squad guy and John Alexander plays as that special teams player. He was at a community college in 2018, then actually transferred over to Kansas State in 2019. did not play in 2020 because of COVID, and then ended up transferring to Charlotte in 2021 and then graduated. But at Kansas State, he was a special teams player and I believe blocked a kick. Was a pretty good special teams player, so that might be why they signed him to this 3-year deal to say, we kind of like your upside. Let's have you on this team. Like I said, you watch the tape. I actually watched all of his games. He is a big guy out there. He looks huge, even though it's an inch or so. He's a big guy. So to me, I don't see him battling for starting spots. What I saw out of him doesn't look like a starter, doesn't look like somebody you necessarily want out there with the ones, unless something absolutely catastrophic happens. To me, I see him as a special teams player, so he's definitely somebody to be on the lookout for, and I honestly think a dark horse to make the roster if they really feel like they want a defensive back that is a true special teams kind of ace besides DHC. So somebody to definitely be on the lookout for. So we have gone through all the players at this safety position, and really, I kind of like this group. When you're looking at this team overall, the players that we lost, Deon Bush and Tashawn Gibson. I like Brisker, and I don't love Crookshank, but I don't think it's just a backup. I think it's not as crucial as a lot of people would think. But I want to go over to the over and unders. So I took a lot of what the Bears did last year, and I want to kind of talk about, do I think they're going to do better, or do I think they're going to do worse? So if you're watching on YouTube and you have the ability to comment, let me know what you think with the 5 interceptions and everything else that's out there. So let's start with the first category. So over under, last year they had 5 interceptions. So the safeties had a total of 5. Now, to be honest, when I'm looking at this is the best. This is the best thing that the Bears did last season because they did not turn the ball over a lot. They did not get a lot of turnovers. 5 interceptions is actually what I would probably project them at this year. So this, I don't want to be a wimp and say push, but I'm actually going to go with the over. I think that they're probably going to get about 6 interceptions. Where they got the 5 interceptions is I believe 2 of them went to Deon Bush, 1 went to DHC, and also I think 2 maybe to Gibson. So not a lot out of the returning players, since 1 is a rookie and also 1 is one got nothing. We talked about that with Eddie Jackson. So I'm going to say over for the interceptions because I think they get 6. I think it's about like 3-3, 2-3 for the starters, and maybe one of the backups just lucks into an interception like we typically see year in and year out. Now, over under, last year we only had 1 forced fumble out of this group, and I'm going to smash the over. I really hope that they at least get some forced fumbles this year. Even though Jaquan Brisker has never forced a fumble in his collegiate career, I think he starts to do that this year. I think we start to see it. So that's why I'm going to say over. I'm going to say over 1 because I really hope at least Eddie Jackson and him at least get 1 or 2. Now, this is the next question that I kind of hung my head after I saw this. We let up 12 passing plays that went over 40 yards. I feel like this is a safety issue, even though that I do remember vividly that we had Kendall Vildor getting burned. But I think having safeties, better safeties out there is definitely going to limit the amount of big plays. And since we had 12 last year, I'm going under. And the big reason why I think under is I think Eddie Jackson takes a step up. And I think also Jaquan Brisker is a very sound corner. He's a very mature corner, and I think very mature safety, and I think he's going to be able to kind of lock this down and lower this number overall. I think another big key piece into this too is we're going to a more simplistic type of a defense. It's a cover 2, keep the people in front of you. And I think that that's going to limit a lot of these 40-plus plays, and hopefully Eddie Jackson is tackling that we're able to then lock more of these plays down. That's why I'm going to say under 12 plays a 40 or more, especially to Vic Fangio's defense was known to be confusing. Sometimes you're playing man, sometimes you're playing zone. There's a lot of disguising of that coverage. So a good example of this is if someone's running a slant and you have the deep zone, in a Fangio scheme, you might even just track that player. It really depends on the circumstance. So to me, that's why you saw a lot of people that were wide open in the Fangio scheme. So smash the under. And last but not least, we had one defensive touchdown last year. Do I think this safety group is going to get more than one defensive touchdown? Now, I think the push is the way to go. To say, I think Eddie Jackson gets one or somebody else, but I'm going to just go over. I think overall as a big group, I think let's say that we get more than one. I think this should be feisty. We probably need to rely on this defense to score a little bit too. So I'm going to say over and be a little bit optimistic with this unit. Like I said, I really like this team. I really like this unit. Now, my last little bit that I want to talk about, did we get better at this position? Now, as you're listening, you probably already know this answer. To me, the answer is yes. I think Eddie Jackson's going to take a step up, so that's a plus. I think that Jaquan Brisker, even though that he's a rookie, is going to play better than Tashawn Gibson. I think Gibson was good like 2 years ago, but last year, not so much. We were kind of figuring out how to kind of replace him at that safety position. I think Brisker is a good and clear step up even as a rookie. Now the backups, I do think that we are losing something by getting rid of Deon Bush. Deon Bush to me was somebody that you could just trust to go in and play very solid, very mediocre. If anybody went down, you felt good about that. Cruikshank, I'm not in love with his play, his style, but hopefully this is a good fit. You saw them go out and get them, so hopefully they know what they're doing with bringing in a player like that. But yet again, it's still just a backup. But I like the depth that we have with Elijah Hicks and even a John Alexander, like I said before, that could push for a potential spot because of the signing. But it is something for all of us to kind of keep a lookout for next year. Like I said, safeties, to me, one of the more sound positions on this Bears roster, and that's definitely saying something. I'm excited. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys all so much. And Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.